This is Ravi Visvesvaraya Sharada Prasad on Tuesday, 14 September 2021. Greetings from all of us family members of Bharat Ratna Sir Mokshagundam Visvesvaraya for Engineers Day on 15th September. Sir Mokshagundam Visvesvaraya, the head of our family and India's greatest engineer and the Diwan of Mysuru, was born at Mudanahalli on 15th September 1860. And today I am examining how and why we in India are poor at commercializing our traditional knowledge and how Europeans, who look at it through a fresh perspective, have obtained patents, and what Sir Mokshagundam Visvesvaraya had to say about this. The marigold flower, which we use in garlands and which is such an integral part of Hindu religious and social rituals, that it is hard to believe that it is actually a native of Mexico and Guatemala. The Tahiti's marigold flowering plant was brought to India by the Portuguese in the 16th and 17th centuries. And because of their orange saffron color, marigolds began to be grown by Indian farmers. And within a few years in the 17th century, Indian farmers discovered that fields where marigolds were grown would no longer be infected by nematode worm pests. And this discovery found its way back to Guatemala, and decoctions of marigold roots began to be used in Aztec medicine to prevent worm infestations of the digestive tract. And my father's younger brother, Professor H.Y. Mohan Ram, was an eminent botanist and geneticist who was interested in economic botany. And early in his career, he was delivering a lecture on botany in the Netherlands, and he casually mentioned in passing that when Indian farmers began growing the Tahiti's marigolds brought by the Portuguese, that they had discovered within a few years in the 17th century, that those fields were no longer infected by nematode worms. And 2 years later, my uncle H.Y. Mohan Ram, he received a letter from a Dutch researcher saying, "Oh, I attended your lecture where you mentioned that marigolds repelled nematodes, and I have successfully identified the chemicals secreted by the roots of these marigolds plants and how they interfere with the reproduction cycle of the nematodes. And I have obtained three patents, and thank you so much for giving me this idea." So, for centuries, no Indian scientist had even bothered to work out the biochemical mechanisms of how marigolds repelled nematodes pests. And no Indian scientist had bothered to manufacture a pesticide from the marigolds plants and make a profit. But this young European scientist picked up on a chance, a casual remark made by my uncle, and he obtained patents and all the commercial profits that resulted from his patents. And even to my uncle, who had studied at Cornell University in USA, Ivy League, and who had worked in Europe, even to my uncle, it had not occurred to him to try to commercialize the knowledge which he had. And the Tigrites, marigolds, roots, they secrete a chemical called alpha terthionyl, and this alpha terthionyl inhibits the hatching of the eggs of the root node nematodes, Melodiorgine, and the eggs of the lesion nematodes, Pratylenchus. But it took a Dutch scientist to discover what to make money out of what Indian farmers knew for centuries. Another very telling example is India's national flower, the lotus flower, our sacred lotus flower, Nilambo nucifera. And we Indians have known for thousands of years that lotus leaves and flowers, they rise above the dirty muddy water without getting soiled themselves. And in fact, the Sanskrit name Pandukeya Ruha, Pandukeya Ruha, it literally means something clean and pure and which is born from mud and dirt, but which rises above this mud unsullied. And this phenomenon of lotus leaves rising above the muddy waters without being soiled is part of Hindu and Buddhist and Jain philosophy and literature and history described in detail in the Bhagavad Gita. Padmapatrami Vambhasa, Padmapatrami Vambhasa, Padmapatrami Vambhasa. And yet, for thousands of years, no one in India bothered to investigate the scientific mechanisms of this phenomenon. And just think of the numerous commercial products that could have been developed using these dirt repellent and water repellent technologies available from nature, from the lotus plant, Padma, Kamala, Pankaja, all of these clothes that do not get dirty at all and so do not need to be washed, floors and roofs of buildings that do not need to be cleaned, buildings that do not need to be painted. So, trillions of man hours of effort over the centuries, thousands of crores of rupees could have been saved if Indians had worked on the dirt repelling technologies of the lotus plant. But it actually took until 1977 for German scientists at the University of Bonn to study this phenomenon of why lotus leaves do not become dirty at all. It's a German scientist called Wilhelm Barthelot and his colleagues at Bonn University. And these German scientists, they quickly developed antifungal and anti-algae plants, roof tiles, self-cleaning cars, and then Swiss scientists then developed stain-resistant fabrics. Recently, some American scientists they used the water repelling properties of lotus leaves to develop coatings for electronic gadgets and cellular phones handsets so that these electronic devices and handsets do not get damaged if they are dropped in water. So, Sir Mokshagundam Visvesvaraya, he had written a lot about this Indian tendency of not commercializing or not acting on knowledge which we already have. And he had made numerous visits to Britain, Europe, North America, Japan to study their technologies in the late 19th century and the early 20th century. And he wrote, as compared with Europe, our climate and traditions all predispose us to a life of inaction and ease. We are influenced either by religious sentiment, class patriotism, or belief in kismat, whereas the activities of Western nations rest on an economic basis. While they think and act in conformity with economic necessities, we expect to prosper without acquiring the scientific precision, the inventive faculty, the thoroughness, the discipline, and restraints of modern civilization. Progress on modern lines is a necessity. We cannot afford to ignore scientific discoveries which have almost vivified material nature. Past ideals were for past times. We must adapt ourselves to the everlasting conditions of existence or be content to be left behind in the race for material prosperity. The Indian mind needs to be familiarized with the principles of modern progress, a universal impulse for inquiry and enterprise, awakened and earnest thinking and effort promoted. A new type of Indian citizenship, purposeful, progressive, and self respecting, should be created, and self reliant nationhood developed. So, this is what the head of our family, Bharat Ratna Sir Mokshagundam Visvesvaraya, had written decades ago. Uh, so please subscribe to my YouTube and IGTV channels, and please follow my Twitter account at RVP, as well as my LinkedIn and my Facebook and my Instagram accounts. My Twitter account is at RVP. This is Ravi Visvesvaraya, Sharada Prasad saying goodbye on Tuesday, 14th September 2021. Have a great day, and again, greetings from all of us family members of Bharat Ratna Sir Mokshagundam Visvesvaraya for Engineers Day on 15th September. Right,